Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone for coming. Currently there's nobody here, but Vibhu said he'll be back, so April Fools. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hare Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hare Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhare Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhare Jasoda Nandana Brajajana Rajana Jasoda Nandana Brajajana Rajana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we will be reading from the Srimad-Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, chapter 46, verse 39. I can see it. This print is too small. Let's see. 10:46. Nachatya karma valoke sadastam mishra yonishu kridartam soapi sadunam paritranaya kalpate Nachasya karma valoke sadasam mishra yonishu kridartam soapi sadunam paritranaya kalpate Nachasya karma valoke sadasam mishra yonishu kridartam soapi sadunam paritranaya kalpate. Word for word, na, there is not, cha, and, asya, for him, karma, work, va, or, loke, in this world, sat, pure, asat, impure, mishra, or midst, yonishu, in wombs or species, krida, of playing, artham, for the sake, saha, he, api, also, sadhunam, of his saintly devotees, paritranaya, for the saving, yeah, kalpate, appears. Translation and no purport by the disciples of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: He, Krishna, has no work to do in this world that will oblige him to take birth in pure, impure, or mixed species of life. Yet to enjoy his pastimes and deliver his saintly devotees, he manifests himself. Amagyantamanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Shakshumaletam Nena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitanyena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaurabhata Binda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai, thank you, everyone, for coming today on April Fool's Day. So, I was going to say a joke, but I don't want to waste your time because we have a lot to cover, hopefully. And since no authority is here, maybe I'll go over time. We'll see. So, as usual, we have to offer our gratitude to people. There's too many people to offer, but first and foremost, as usual, I'd like to offer my gratitude to my brother, His Grace, Jaya Jagannath Prabhu, and my mother, but reverse the order because my mother came first. So, as usual, I'd like to start off today and thank you for anyone who's here, Vibhu Prabhu, and those who are watching online. So, as usual, I'd like to start off this class with a quote that sets the theme of what we'll be discussing today. It's actually a similar class to what Karuna Nidhi Prabhu gave on Monday. Unfortunately, it wasn't recorded. It was a very amazing class he gave. But today's quote is by maybe a Greek philosopher, Pericles, and he says, quote, "Just because you do not take an interest in quote, just because you do not take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you," end quote. Let me repeat that quote. Just because you do not take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you, end quote. So in this regard, I should be pointing out that another word for politics is fault finding. So Karuna Nidhi's class actually on Monday was all about fault finding. And so since another word for politics is fault finding, today's quote can be rephrased like this: just because you do not take an interest in fault finding doesn't mean fault finding won't take an interest in you. Let me repeat that. Just because you do not take an interest in fault finding does not mean fault finding won't take an interest in you. Now, how does this quote relate to today's verse? Well, it's very simple. In today's verse, it says Krishna is not obliged to appear in this world. Now, what does the word obliged mean? I actually looked it up. So the meaning of the word obliged is defined as to make someone legally or morally bound to an action or course of action. And so to make it more clear, there are three synonyms, at least three synonyms for the word obliged. And these three synonyms are bind, constrained, and forced. Now, who's bound, constrained, and forced to do something? Prisoners, right? So this world is described that this world is known as a prison house. So therefore, in the Brahma Samhita, the 5th chapter, of course, there's only one chapter, the 5th chapter. 5th chapter, verse 44, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he says that we're all obliged to appear in this world, which is known as Durga. And he says another name for Durga, the meaning of Durga is prison house. And so how does this relate to fault finding? It's very simple. One of my friends told me, Sunny Prabhu, if you know him, Sunny, maybe you met him. He makes a good point, so it reminded me of this class. He essentially said that suppose a prisoner, he calls over the security guard, hey guard, can you come here? And so then a guard says, yes, what is it? Yeah, guard, you know my cellmate, that criminal? Yeah, he has a lot of faults. You gotta be kidding me, right? You know you're in prison, you're a criminal too, you have a lot of faults too. And so this is the nature of most relationships, that especially marriage. Marriage, any relationship really, because you know, what are the 5 rasas that are relationships with Krishna? Do you know them? Sakya ras, Vatsalya ras, what are the other ones? Servant, friendship, parental, reverence, yeah, conjugal. I think that covers it. And what else? Yeah, shantaras, peace, like a piece of grass, maybe. Maybe you're the grass, the shantaras. So anyways, so it doesn't matter with relationships. We really consider any relationship in this world, friendship, parental, conjugal, they're all our soulmates, right? All our soulmates. But in this world, soulmate quickly turns into cellmate. And we see that, that's practically because especially in Kali Yuga, soulmate turns into cellmate. And so my best friend today could turn into my worst enemy tomorrow. And so we see this in our relationships. Why? And so this is the nature of relationships in this world. To find fault with a prisoner, to find fault with others is like a criminal. It's exactly like a criminal who finds fault with his cellmates. We're all in this prison. That means we're all prisoners of Maya. And so therefore there's a nice quote. It says, people demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought, which they seldom use. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought, which they seldom use. And so this is, it's like the famous incident in the Bible where there was one woman, she committed adultery. And so then these religious fanatics who were proud scholars, they dragged this woman out in front of Jesus and they asked Jesus, Jesus, the old law says that we should stone to death a person engaged in adultery. So then they asked Jesus, so what is your judgment? What do you say based on these teachings? And so Jesus, he was thoughtful for a minute. So he held his head down, then he looked up. And they all had stones in their hands, ready to kill her. And we see this practice even goes on sometimes still today, even in the Middle East. So they all had stones ready to kill her, but they were waiting for Jesus' confirmation. So what did Jesus say? He famously says, quote, he who is free of sin, let him be the first to cast the stone. He who is free of sin, let him be the first to cast the stone. That's what Jesus says. And you know what they all did? Their mouths dropped and they all dropped their stones. And they all walked away. Why? Because same thing. This world is known as prison. You're a prisoner of Maya. And so that's what it's like. To find fault with others, that means you have the exact same faults, actually. So they're also doing adultery too, probably. Doing the same exact thing. And so we could see that we all have an inner demon known as self-righteousness. So there's something called righteousness, and there's something called self-righteousness. And so we're all meant to be righteous What does that mean? Look at your own faults. Self-righteous means to look at others' faults. And so we could see this inner demon known as self-righteous gets us in a lot of trouble. So I mentioned before, there's a saying, just as criminals who escape from prison will cause problems for all of human society. So when our bad qualities escape from us through our words and our actions, they cause problems for us and potentially for others. So how does the government subdue criminals? With security guards. So it's described that a wise person subdues pride with humility, envy with appreciation, and vengeance with forgiving. And so there's a nice quote that says, as long as the word remains unspoken, you are its master. Once you utter it, you are a slave. Of course, I mentioned this quote many times, but there's also a very nice similar quote. It says, quote, strong feelings do not necessarily make a strong character. The strength of a man is to be measured by the power of the feelings he subdues, not by the power of those which subdue him. I'll repeat that because it's a powerful quote. Quote, strong feelings do not necessarily make a strong character. The strength of a man is to be measured by the power of the feelings he subdues, not by the power of those which subdue him. End quote. So when we're speaking of fault finding, in researching this class, as far as the scriptures are concerned, there are many fault finders, but maybe I'll discuss a couple of pastimes. But the first pastime that came to mind, of course, I like to contrast, the great saints or the sincere devotees with the insincere devotees. So this pastime, I'm contrasting Hare Dasakur with Ramachandra Puri. So it's described that, so these pastimes, the pastime with Hare Dasakur, for reference, it's in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Madhya, chapter 10, verse 35 through 44. And when I contrast it with Ramachandra Puri, his pastime is described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya Lila, chapter 8, verses 18 through 27. So that's what we'll be discussing now. And so we see in Haridasa Kaur, he found no fault where there was a lot of fault. In Ramachandra Puri, he found fault where there was no fault. And so I kind of like to start off. So I'll start off with Haridasa Kaur, how he remained spiritually powerful. Now, when we do anything in life, in any endeavor, we want to become powerful in whatever we do, right? Nobody says, I want to become powerless. Everyone wants to become very powerful. So the Bhagavatam, in the 5th canto, chapter 18, verse 13, describes how we can become powerful in Krishna consciousness. Hare hi sakshat Bhagavan shadirinam amajashanam ivatoyam ipsitam hitwamam samyadi sajate griye tada mahatvam vayasada patinam. So this is a very beautiful verse, one of my favorite ones, and it uses an operative word, jashanam, aquatics. So it basically says, Prabhupada uses the analogy of a crocodile, but you could use any aquatics. It says aquatics. So it says, just as a shark who stays in the ocean is powerful, and a shark who strays from the ocean is powerless. So if we stay in the ocean of Krishna consciousness, we remain powerful. If we stray from this ocean, we become powerless. So how does this relate to Haridas Thakur? Well, he was beat in 22 marketplaces by some religious fanatics. He was in one religion, converted to another religion, and so these religious fanatics told Haridas Thakur, if you do not convert back to our religion, then we'll beat you in 22 marketplaces. And so Haridas Thakur, he gave them some philosophy that, there's only one God, he has many names, just like the sun. One sun has many names, but they weren't inspired by Haridas Thakur, so they kept their promise. They beat him in 22 marketplaces. And Haridas Thakur, Lord Chaitanya says to Haridas Thakur, he says, my dear Haridas Thakur, my Sudarshan chakra was ready to come from Vaikuntha and sever the heads of these religious fanatics. But because you only saw the good in their hearts, it was powerless to harm them. And so what's the lesson we could take from this pastime? Many lessons, but one of them is that Haridas Thakur was at the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong people, but because he had the right mentality, the ocean of Krishna consciousness, he always remained spiritually powerful and happy, right? Happy. How do we know whether we're powerful or not? You're happy A shark in the ocean is happy. A shark outside the ocean is unhappy. So if we're unhappy, that means we have to check, the ocean of our Krishna consciousness if we're unhappy and if we find so many faults. And so contrasting Haridas Thakur's story with Ramachandrapuri, long story, there was a devotee named Ramachandrapuri, and Ramachandrapuri had a guru, a spiritual master named Madhavendrapuri, excuse me. His spiritual master name was Madhavendrapuri. And so one day, Madhavendrapuri was on his deathbed crying in separation from Krishna. And so Ramachandrapuri, he criticized his guru because he jumped to conclusions. He says, "My dear Guru Maharaj," can you imagine criticizing your guru like this? Probably not. You'll have your uninitiation ceremony. So he criticized his guru. He says, "My dear Guru Maharaj, in the Gita, Krishna says we're not the body, and that a wise person laments neither for the living nor for the dead. So why are you crying? You're dying, your eternal soul." He made some false accusations of, he could see what he was doing, his guru was doing, but he couldn't see why he was doing it. So that's a lesson we could say. We could see what others are doing, but unless we know why others are doing it, then we'll get ourselves in a lot of trouble from speculating or jumping to conclusions. And the reality is that we'll never know why, because the why is invisible. You cannot see motivations. The why, so you'll never know the why. Only Krishna knows the why. So what is the lesson? Trinadapi Suni Chaina. Show respect. Amani Namanadena. Show respect without expecting respect. And let Krishna do the judgment. And so anyways, because of this guru aparad, this offense towards Madhavendrapuri, it's described that Ramachandrapuri, he couldn't find any good in anyone but himself. He found fault with everyone. Now, we could say other devotees have faults, right? Because that's the reality. We're prisoners of Maya, right? But he even found fault with Lord Chaitanya. So he's transcendental to Maya. And so one day, Lord Chaitanya, who I took sannyas at this time, was in a room, and there was a whole bunch of ants that Ramachandrapuri saw in Lord Chaitanya's room. He says, "My dear Lord Chaitanya," of course he probably didn't call him Lord, maybe he did, they call the British rulers lords too, so maybe he called him Lord Chaitanya. He says, "My dear Lord, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I can see that there's ants in your room. You're supposed to be renounced as sannyasi. Ants indicates you must be hiding some rasagura, some globulins, some sweet rice, some kheer. And so you're a pig. You're a pig. You're a bogus sannyasi." So in this way, he even found fault with Lord Chaitanya. So what's the lesson we can take from Ramachandrapuri? Now, we may say, I cannot take a lesson from him. Yes, you could take a lesson from everyone. Why? Because devotees like Haridas Thakur, they teach us what to do. Devotees like Ramachandrapuri, they teach us what not to do. So we could see that the Bhagavatam, all spiritual teachings are basically there, because we all have a good nature and we all have a bad nature. And sometimes we fluctuate between teaching others what to do and teaching others what not to do. We're more on the side of teaching others what not to do. So people may say, why am I giving this Bhagavatam class? Because I'm teaching you what not to do. I'm not teaching you what to do. And that's the nature we learn from this. That's the whole foundation of motivational speakers, actually. I've never seen a motivational speaker who can motivate somebody and say, I've never committed any mistakes in my life. I made all the right decisions. Aren't you motivated by the speech? Not really. No, motivational speakers say, I've committed so many mistakes in my life, and this is how I've overcome my obstacles, and I'm sharing with you so that potentially you may not make the same mistakes. And so this is the nature of motivational speakers, and this is the nature of all the great saints, Vaishnava, very, very humble. And so anyways, Haridas Thakur is teaching us what to do, and Ramachandrapuri, he's teaching us what not to do. So what is he teaching us? The opposite of what Haridas Thakur. So Ramachandrapuri, the lesson is, he was at the right place at the right time with the right people. But because he had the wrong mentality, he remained spiritually powerless. He strayed toward the land of Maya. So a shark in the ocean is powerful, right? A shark that strays from the ocean on the land is powerless. So Ramachandrapuri became powerless, unhappy, because he strayed towards the land of Maya. And what's the land of Maya? So the lesson is fault finding. And so when he strayed, and there's many reasons why people find fault in the scriptures, briefly, like people find fault because of envy. People find fault because somebody doesn't have enough wealth. Like Daksha, his daughter wanted to marry Lord Shiva. But Dasha was like, he's poor, he's broke, he's dirty. You got to be kidding me. So people find fault because you're poor. People find fault because you don't have a education. People don't find fault because you are not in their religion. People find faults for unlimited reasons. Why? Because we're prisoners of our mind, prisoners of Maya. And maybe I should say this, but I was gonna say something with Rama probably. he told me he said his dad said this. His dad has a sister, and before he made a lot of money, before he made a lot of money. So I'm getting I'll tell you guys afterwards. That's why you have to come to Bhagavatam class. I'm getting the instruction from one devotee in the class not to mention it. I don't think it's because his sister is not related to it, but that's why you have to come to Bhagavatam class. But it's an important lesson. So anyways, the lesson is that it's kind of related to a fault finding. When somebody's poor, you find fault, but when somebody's rich, you glorify them. So that's basically, and so there's unlimited reasons why we find. So if we stray towards the land of Maya, then this land means the land of, it's not Neverland, it's not the land of fun, it's the land of fault finding. So it's the land of fun, but the land of faults. And so this is a lesson we could take from Ramachandra Puri. So we could see like Haridas Thakur, if we can find happiness even among our enemies who hate us, that means we'll be able to find happiness everywhere. Like Ramachandra Puri, if we cannot even find happiness among our friends who love us, that means we won't even find happiness anywhere. And so therefore, Prabhupada named this society the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He never said it was the International Society for Krishna Circumstances. Why? Because we learn from Haridas Thakur that even if our circumstances aren't perfect, but if our consciousness is perfect, then we'll always remain spiritually powerful and happy. We learn from Ramachandra Puri that even if our circumstances are perfect, but if our consciousness isn't perfect, then we'll remain spiritually powerless and unhappy. So that's the lesson we could take from Haridas Thakur and Ramachandra Puri. Now, as far as this analogy of a prisoner is concerned, now what's the demarcation between a free person and a prisoner? What do you think? What's the demarcation? Anybody? What's the demarcation between a prisoner and a free person? Of course, there can be many answers, but we'll just try to brainstorm briefly. Yeah, so we would probably say a free person is righteous and he voluntarily follows the law. And a prisoner, he also follows the law, but he's forced to, involuntary, obliged. Just like Krishna is not obliged to appear in this world, we're obliged to do so many things in this world because we're prisoners. We're prisoners of our boss. If you don't come to work, you don't get the money. So you're a prisoner, actually. And you feel it every day. Oh my God, my work is prison. Or you're a prisoner of the threefold miseries. There's nothing you can do about it. You're prisoners of the modes of material nature, your lust, your anger, your greed. So this world is unbelievably prison. So you have an answer, Marsaji? What's the demarcation? All right, she says his answer is good enough. So yes, that's not a wrong answer. So there's no wrong answer. But the direction I'm going, the difference between the demarcation between a free person and a prisoner is a free person is happy and a prisoner is unhappy, right? And so we see Haridas Thakur, he was free. Why? He was happy. Ramachandra Puri, he was a prisoner because he was unhappy. And so what does that mean? So look at Haridas Thakur's situation. He was beat in 22 Market. He was actually a prisoner. He was enslaved, right? So although Haridas Thakur was a slave, a prisoner on the outside, he was still happy because he was free on the inside with good qualities, right? Now look at Ramachandra Puri. He was free on the outside, but he was still unhappy because he was a prisoner of his bad qualities on the inside. And so therefore there's many nice quotes, many nice references in the Bhagavatam. There's too many to count, but one of them, so I'll share a string of quotes, and I'm starting with one from the Bhagavatam that describes how we're prisoners in this material world. So this is from the 10th canto, chapter 14, verse 36. It says, quote, "Until people become Lord Krishna's sincere devotees, their material attachments and desires remain thieves. Their homes remain prisons." Soulmate, cellmate. See, it says the same thing. "Their homes remain prisons, and their affectionate feelings for their family members remain foot shackles." End quote. And so I'll go through a series of quotes related to this subject matter. So Deepak Chopra, he says, quote, "Every time you are tempted to react in the same old way, ask if you want to be a prisoner of the past or a pioneer of the future." End quote. St. Augustine wrote, quote, "He that is kind is free, though he is a slave. He that is evil is a slave, though he be a king." End quote. Max Lucado wrote, quote, "Forgiveness is unlocking the door to set someone free and realizing you were the prisoner." End quote. Before I say the last couple of quotes, this particular quote reminds me of something His Holiness Chandramauli Maharaj said, actually. So Chandramauli Maharaj gave a class one day. And so he says this one Mataji came to him and says, "Maharaj, I have a very difficult time forgiving my friend." And so Maharaj asked her, "Well, how long has it been since you had a dispute?" Mataji knows the answer. "How long has it been since you had a dispute with your friend?" And so she says, "It's been 25 years. What? That's what Maharaj said. "You're kidding, right?" She wasn't kidding. She was a prisoner for 25 years and probably the rest of her life. So therefore, so that's a hilarious. So actually, we're not hurting anyone but ourselves when we don't have good quality. There's another quote that I didn't put in here. It says, "Never put the key to your happiness in someone else's pocket." And so we see when we put our happiness in someone else's pocket, they're our prisoners, or we're their prisoners for life. And so therefore, this quote says, "Forgiveness is unlocking the door to set someone free and realizing you were the prisoner." And so the last couple of quotes, the next one's by B.R. Ambedkar, and he says, quote, "Freedom of mind is the real freedom. A person whose mind is not free, though he may not be in chains, is a slave, not a free man. One whose mind is not free, though he may not be in prison, is a prisoner and not a free man. One whose mind is not free, though alive, is no better than dead. Freedom of mind is the proof of one's existence." End quote. So the last quote by Tony Gaskins is one of my favorite ones. So listen up. It says, quote, "Negative people need drama like oxygen. Stay positive. It will take their breath away." End quote. So I'll share that one more time. It says, "Negative people need drama like oxygen. Stay positive. It will take their breath away." This is precisely what happened when the religious fanatics were beating Haridas Thakur. They ran out of breath, right? And there was like, nobody lasts past 2 marketplaces. He's lasting 22, and he's smiling. Haridas Thakur taught us his lesson, stay positive. They literally lost their breath. It took their breath away. And so why? Because there's a saying, misery loves company. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur says this in his bhajan, Amar Jivan, my life. That's the title of it. Amar Jivan, the translation is my life. This is my life. And he's humbly admitting or humbly taking a position of a fallen condition soul. And he says in the bhajan, "I am remorseful seeing others happy, and the miseries of others is a great source of pleasure for me." So what does that mean? It means exactly what it says. When others are happy, I'm miserable. When others are miserable, I'm happy. And this is the nature of, to some extent, devotee relationships. So the lesson we learn from Haridas Thakur is that there are two kinds of oxygen. Two kinds of oxygen. So this verse says, stay positive, because it would take negative people's breath away, because drama is their oxygen. So we learn from our teachings that there are two kinds of oxygen. Rama and drama. Next week is Lord Ram Nomi's appearance, right? And so our oxygen should be Lord Rama and not Lord Drama. That's our master, drama. Who's your Guru Maharaj? Drama. Our Guru Maharaj should be Rama and not drama. And so we see, this is the lesson we learned from Lord Chaitanya in the last verse of the Shishashakam prayers, right? What does he say? Ashlisha vabadaratam panashtumama darshanama mahatam karotuva yata tata vavidatu lampato mat prananath tusa eva na padaha. Mat prananath. What does prana mean? Oxygen, your life, air. So mat prananath. So who's the mat prananath? Kishori. That's my oxygen. Lord Rama. Rama is my oxygen, not drama. So we can see that why should it be this way? Because what does drama mean? It means you don't get your way, or people are not miserable. You're not miserable. So we see people's conception is if I'm miserable, then we're happy, right? You're miserable, then I'm happy. But no, shouldn't be our teaching. This is not Vaishnavism. This is not Vaishnava. We should want, what is that? What's that? Sukha, Dukhi, Sukha, Pada Sukha, Dukha. Say it one more time. Pada Sukha, Dukhi. The miseries of others is my misery, right? And so then for the opposite, the happiness of others is my happiness. So this is Vaishnavism. This is our Vaishnavism. And so that should be our oxygen. So what does Rama mean? It means the happiness of others is my happiness. And drama means the miseries of others is my happiness. And so this is one lesson we could take in our own lives. And so we see that the religious fanatics who were beating Haridas Thakur, they not only lost their breath because the Lord protected Haridas Thakur, but because he was smiling, he stayed positive. So that's our lesson in life. Always stay positive and never have any negativity towards anyone, even if they have negativity towards you. So Haridas Thakur is the embodiment. Actually, there's one purport where Prabhupada says, Haridas Thakur, now Prabhupada uses the word, you could easily look it up on Vedamace. Haridas Thakur epitomizes, so Prabhupada uses the word, he epitomizes Lord Chaitanya's verse of being more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, and offered all respect to others without expecting respect in return. And so Prabhupada in his purport to the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says, this is the foremost order of Vaishnavism. Urva bahu kari konha shuna sarva loka, nama suche ganti pada kante e shloka. Even if you don't know any verse in our teachings, if you know this one verse, then you will always remain happy. And so we could see that, many people could speak, like so many scholars, the Rasamuni, the Brahmanas, who were that past time, the wise of the Brahmanas. There was the Brahmanas and there was the wise of the Brahmanas. So those Brahmanas were very proud of their learning. Durvasamuni, very proud of his learning. Keshava Kashmiri, very proud of their learning. So we see these devotees in the scriptures. They could speak, they could give speeches composed of thousands of words. But because they couldn't practice one word, humility, the Lord didn't consider them an authority in Vaishnavism. So there's a nice quote by Lord Buddha. He says, even though a speech be 1,000 words, but made up of senseless words, one word of sense is better, which if a man hears, he becomes quiet, peaceful, and humble. So I'll say that again. Even though a speech be 1,000 words, but made up of senseless words, one word of sense is better, which if a man hears, he becomes quiet, peaceful, and humble. Urva bahu kari kohon shuna sarva loka, Namasuche ganti padakante e shloka. So if you only know one shloka, then learn this one. Trinada pisuni shena. Tador ivasahi shnuna amani namanadena. Kirtaniya sadahadi. So we may know so many shlokas, but if we don't know this one shloka, then we'll get ourselves in a lot of trouble. We'll fall fine. We won't be happy in our Krishna consciousness and in our devoted relationships. And the result of having any negativity towards anyone it's like you work with a boss. Let's say you have a boss, and your boss, that's the nature of the world. People exploit others. So you don't like your boss, you don't like your coworkers. And so what does family time mean? Quality family time. It means husband, wife, family, friends come together. And quality time means to share with each other all the people you hate. And so we see that when we take that negativity from school, from work, from outside, from maybe from devotees in the temple, when we take that home to our friends and family, nobody wants to hear that all the time. So we can see that causes even problems with the people we love, right? So then they're starting an argument because nobody wants to hear that all the time. And so this is why it's so important to be humble and forgiving, because it will even cause problems with the people you even love. So this is the lesson we could take from all these great saints. So anyways, Haridas Thakur, he always kept a positive attitude whether he was beat. And so what did he tell the Muslim king? He told the Muslim king, my dear king, you may be a king, but you are not the king. You may be a controller, but you are not the controller. Even if you cut my body up into thousands of pieces, each of those thousands of pieces will continue to speak the glories of Krishna unfailingly. This is the lesson Lord Krishna teaches us in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14, verse 27. And so it says, one who engages in devotional service unfailingly, like Haridas Thakur, whether he's honored, whether he's dishonored, whether he's treated with respect, or whether he's beat in 22 marketplaces, doesn't matter. Still, engage in devotional service unfailingly, and you'll always remain devoted to Rama, and you'll always avoid the drama. And so how does Krishna say this is possible? So the previous verse, Arjuna asked Krishna, how is this possible? So Krishna says, before he says this, Mam chayo abhyabhichanena bhakti yogena sevate saguna samaditaitam brahma bhuyaya kalpate. He says in the previous verse, how can I remain positive? Arjuna asked Krishna. Actually, if you want to rephrase it, how do I stay positive? Krishna says, Arjuna, treat honor and dishonor the same. Friends and enemy is the same. Happiness and distress is the same. A piece of gold and a pebble is the same. Now, I wouldn't recommend giving your wife a pebble ring over a gold ring. So you probably won't stay positive. You'll probably be sleeping outside, along with the other homeless people. So we could disregard that teaching for Krishna. So do not treat a pebble and a gold as the same. So anyways, Krishna says, why does Krishna say treat these dualities as the same? Why? Because it's very simple. That if our happiness is only dependent on being honored and respected, that means if nobody ever honored you, if nobody ever respected you, that means you'll always have a negative mentality. You'll always be miserable. You'll always fault find, right? And so there's two things in this world. Things outside our control and things inside our control. Outside our control is the weather. Inside our control is building a shelter. In much the same way, outside our control is persons, places, things, and circumstances. Inside our control is building character. So therefore, in the beginning of the Gita, what does Krishna say in chapter 2, verse 14? Matra sparshastu konteya shitosha sukha dukada agama nino anityas tamtiticha swabarta. He says, persons, they're like the weather. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, right? And people, they could go from 90 degrees hot outside to below zero in a split second. So they actually change faster than the weather. And so this is natural. This is Because we're under the moles, right? We can't have a good attitude all the time. We're being exploited from so many angles. We have so many pressures, right? We go to work, our boss is giving us so much negativity, our coworkers, our family, our financial situation. So naturally, we're all gonna fluctuate, in our happiness, naturally. And so we may make mistakes. But still, so that's why we read these teachings of how we could at least try to have a good positive attitude on all circumstances of life. And how is this possible? Just as you build a shelter when the weather is bad, you build character when persons, places, things, and circumstances are bad, you could say. And so the lesson is, although it may not be springtime on the outside, it can always be springtime on the inside if you build the shelter, right? And you have the thermostat, you could control the temperature. Similarly, although persons, places, things, and circumstances may not be all good on the outside, they can always be all good on the inside, depending how much you build your character, how much you build your humility, how much you build your forgiveness, your tolerance. So therefore, in the Gita, in chapter 9, Krishna says, Mahatmanas tu mam partha daivam prakritam ashritaha. The word ashritaha, like ashraya, they're synonyms, they're the same thing. It means, Krishna says in so many verses, take shelter in me. And that means read the books. If we're looking at Facebook all the time and spying on our friends and family, look at them, they're having fun on a vacation. Here I am, struggling to pay my bills. That's what Facebook it is, just to spy on all the people you hate usually. They're having fun, traveling. And here we are arguing with each other at ISKCON Chicago. Everyone's traveling and having fun. And here we are bitter. So that's what Facebook usually means. Just it has nothing to do with friends. You only friend somebody to spy on them. That's all. So if we're wasting our time on Facebook and not spending enough time on Faithbook, then what do we expect? We'll always be fault finding, always be miserable. And so this is a lesson we could take. Stay off the Facebook and put your head in the faith book. Srimad-Bhagavatam, Shrimvatam, Swakata, Krishna, Punya, Shravanam, Kirtana, Hridyantas, Stohya, Bhadrani, Vidunoti, Suhisatam. Krishna says, if we study this Bhagavatam properly by hearing and chanting, then he'll get rid of the Facebook within our heart. And we'll have attraction for faith book. Shushusho Shada Dinasa Vasudeva Kataruchi Siyama Hatseva Yavipa Punya Tirthani Shavana. By serving the devotees and not finding fault with the devotees, then what's the result? Vasudeva Kataruchi. We find ruchi, taste, in faith book, in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so, moving on, what's our time? I can't see. 25. I spent way too much time on that, so it was kind of spontaneous. So, anyways, so the whole point is that as today's verse from the Bhagavatam mentions, that Krishna is not obliged to appear in the prison of this material world, but he comes to deliver his devotees. Prabhupada will often give the example. Now, there's two nice examples I like. Prabhupada gave the example that it's like a governor. A governor, he's the only one who has the power to exonerate a prisoner from prison. So if a prisoner sees the governor in the prison house, that he cannot say, oh, he's just like me. No, he's not just like you. He could leave whenever he wants. And he can also release you. And because he has control over the prison house. And so he's not entangled. He's not obliged to appear in that prison house. But he comes, and we see that governors or presidents or some politician has the power to exonerate people from prison. And sometimes they visit the prison house. But they're not obliged to do that. But they do that out of their mercy. Sometimes they find that people are falsely accused of something and they're put in prison. And we see lawyers, they'll hire somebody, they'll do an investigation, they'll exonerate them from prison. And so Krishna, he's not obliged to appear in this world. So that's one analogy. He's not entangled in the prison of this house. And another analogy is a spider that Jaya Maharaj mentioned. A spider, he's not entangled in the web of this world or his web, because it comes from him. Because this world comes from Krishna, he cannot be entangled in the prison house, but we're entangled in Maya. Same with the spider. Because this web comes from the spider, he can never be entangled in the spider web. But we're entangled in the web of Maya. And so we're completely different from Krishna. But how do we become free? By following Krishna's instructions. So the whole point is that Krishna's words are always true because he's not a prisoner of this world, or he's not entangled in the web of Maya. And so devotees like Ramachandra Puri, the whole point is that that I could be wrong, but last time I checked, the Gita doesn't say Ramachandra Puri said. The Gita doesn't say he said. The Gita doesn't say she said, nor does the Gita say they said. The Gita says, Sri Bhagavan Ubacha, Krishna says. In other words, our only concern should be not what he said, not what she said, not what they said, but our only concern should be, what does Krishna say? Why? Because Padam Brahmam, Padam Dhammam, Pavitram Panama Bhavam Purusham Shashrutam Divyam Adi Deva Majavi Boom Ahustam Rishaya Sarve Deva Shir Naradastata Asito Deva Lovyasa Swayam Shaiva Bravishime. Arjun says many things, but one of them he says, Lord Krishna, you are Divyam. You are transcendental to Maya's web. You are transcendental to this prison house. So whatever you say, it's the absolute truth. Because we're entangled in Maya's web, we have misconceptions, we misjudge, we speculate, we have so many faults. So whatever we say, we have the 4 defects of a condition. So basically, whenever we want to make a statement, then our statement should be based on Sastra. Siddhanta Baliya Chitte Nakala Alas Iha Hoite Krishna Lagin Sudrida Manas. Balaram Prabhu quoted this verse on Sunday Feast recently. So it says, one should not neglect controversial topics based on Shastra and not on our mind, because that means the conversation will go unlimited. So it doesn't matter. We should read the books, and our statement should be, why? Because if we have faith in it, or if we claim to have faith in it, then what are the use of it if we don't actually read it and emulate that in our life and references of how we should conduct our lives? That means the Shastras are a useless waste of time. We see conversations, debates, arguments, they're a useless waste of time. Why? Because we're not reading faith book. And so Prabhupada also quotes a verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in his purports to the Gita, chapter 7, verse 3. Shruti Shrinti Parana Adi Pancharashi Vidimvina Aikantiki Hare Bhaktir Upata Yaiva Kalpate. Devotional service that completely ignores the Shruti, the Shrinti, the Bhagavatam, the scriptures, the Shastras, is completely an unnecessary disturbance. And what's the disturbance? The disturbance is actually not from we're not disturbing people on the outside, we're actually disturbing our own consciousness on the inside, like Ramachandra Puri. So the real disturbance is that if we don't read these teachings of how to become free from the prison of Maya, how to become free from this web of Maya, then the only disturbance is to our own consciousness. And so that's the whole purpose. And so there's another verse. Krishna says, this divine energy of mine, consisting of Maya's web, this sticky web that gets us in so many sticky situations, is very difficult to overcome. But those who follow my instructions, and what is following Krishna's instructions like? It's like transforming yourself into a fault-finding fly, like Ramachandra Puri, into a splendid, spirited spider, like Haridas Thakur. You follow this instruction, you remain free from Maya's web. And so Prabhupada also mentions this in his purport to this is verses from the Gita, chapter 7, verse 14. And so he mentions how we're entangled in the prison house of Maya. So he says in the Gita, his purport, chapter 7, verse 14, purport. He says, quote, another meaning of guna is rope. It is to be understood that the conditioned soul is tightly tied by the ropes of illusion. A man bound by the hands and feet cannot free himself. He must be helped by a person who is unbound. Because the bound cannot help the bound, the rescuer must be liberated. Therefore, only Lord Krishna or his bona fide representative, the spiritual master, can release the conditioned soul. So Prabhupada mentions a bona fide representative of Krishna consciousness. So It's described that a bona fide representative of Krishna consciousness is devoted to their, you could say, neutralism. Subal Prabhu was mentioned on Wednesday. A leader is supposed to be neutral. But a bogus representative of Krishna consciousness is devoted to their nepotism. So we have two things, neutralism and nepotism. And so we see that our teachings say that a leader should always be neutral. And what causes us, and so what is nepotism? That means to show favor to your friends and family. And so what does that mean? That means, Prabhu, why do you say they're right? Why do you say they're always correct? They're my friends and family. They're always right, even if they're wrong. And my enemies, they're always wrong, even if they're right. Or you could say, what is another form of nepotism? So, Prabhu, why do you say, this person is hot, or is right, like Mohini? She's hot. And so we see that people since we're imprisoned by Maya, that means imprisoned by nepotism, imprisoned by lust, that we can never be neutral, never be neutral. And so, but the scripture desires that if we're, especially want to take a position of judging others, if we're in a position of management, a position of leadership, a king, then we should follow these teachings of how to be neutral. And so this is described in the 4th canto, chapter 16, verse 13 in the Bhagavatam, where it's described that King Prithu was neutral. So what does King Prithu say? Or this verse from the Bhagavatam, it says, 4th canto, chapter 16, verse 13, it says, quote, since King Prithu will always remain on the path of piety, he will be neutral to both his son and the son of his enemy. If the son of his enemy is not punishable, he will not punish him. But if his own son is punishable, he will immediately punish him. Have you ever seen that throughout the history of mankind? No, I've never seen it. So what do you know? I mean, that's like somebody saying, somebody's saying, I've never seen this. We have a few bogus devotees in our community. Well, who are they? They're my wife and kids. I've never seen that throughout the history. Nobody's going to say it. Why? The husband will be on the street, homeless or dead. And no, so what is the lesson? The lesson we could take is that if we want to try to expose the faults or so-called faults of our enemies, then expose the faults, or you could say so-called faults of your family and friends. But if we do not want to expose the faults of our friends and family, do not expose the faults or so-called faults of your so-called enemies, actually. And so this is how, that's why they off on top of the baby. She would rather get still, I mean, come on. Just tolerate. That's stalemate to fulfill the Dhritarashtra bounds. But from a better angle or vision, he may realize, oh, I was outside the bound. The referees arrived, or vice versa. So the lesson is that we all have a inner demon known as speculation. So I'll mention this one time. Just as criminals who escape from prison will cause problems for all of human society, so when our bad qualities escape from us through our words and our actions, they cause problems for us and potentially for others. How does the government subdue criminals? With security guards. So it's described that a wise person subdues pride with humility, envy with appreciation, vengeance with forgiveness, and speculation with education. Speculation means to see from one angle of vision. Education means to see from all angles of vision. And so there's a couple of pastimes, Haridas Thakur. So this is actually described in the Antya-lila, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya-lila, chapter 3, verse 114 through 115. Everyone knows the pastime. I'm not going to go through the stint, but it's described that somebody was envious of Haridas Thakur. They sent a prostitute to seduce him. And with it, Haridas Thakur, when the prostitutes came out to him, the prostitute says, Haridas Thakur, you're so young, you're so desirable. can we unite? And so what did Haridas Thakur say? He's like, yes, let's get it on. Why? But first, let me finish my rounds. Now, this is precisely what Haridas Thakur says in his verse, right? Yes, I will sleep with you, right? Now, if we had iPhones back then when the Haridas Thakur say, we could record Haridas Thakur saying, I will sleep with you, and we could post it on Facebook, Dandavats, the GBC websites. Boom, Haridas Thakur is a charlatan devotee. But no, the lesson we could say is that we have one angle of vision, but the Lord has all angles of vision. People can only see what you do. Almighty God can see why you do it. So that's two things in the world, what we do and why we do it. So we can only see what people do, but only God can see why we do it. So Haridas Thakur, the purpose for him doing that is so that the prostitute, if she goes away, then she won't hit a Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And same in the pastime of Ramananda Roy. So I'll end with this. So devotees could look it up. This is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya-lila, chapter 5, verse 17. So it's described that Praduma Mishra, he went to Lord Chaitanya. He says, Lord Chaitanya, I want to hear topics about Krishna from you. Please tell me about Krishna. Lord Chaitanya says, I do not know anything about Krishna. You have to go to Ramananda Roy. So he went to the temple of Ramananda Roy, and he discovered that actually Ramananda Roy was literally massaging women, naked women, with oil, actually. So then he went to Lord Chaitanya. He was like, you got to be kidding me, right? This is a great Vaishnava. He's a householder. Does his wife approve of this too? And so what did Lord Chaitanya says? He says, yes, you can only see what Ramananda Roy does, but I can see why he does it. He's actually envisioning himself in his original Swarup position in the spiritual world as a maid servant of the gopis. So he's actually has no lust for these women. And I don't know, I guess the maid servants of the gopis I don't know. These teachers are beyond me, they're achinta inconceivable, but the lesson we could learn is that people can only see what you do, but Krishna can see why you do it. Why? Because people only have one angle of vision, but God, the angels, the demigods, the super soul, they have all angles of vision. And so what is it? It means stalemates. Tolerate whatever faults other has and let Krishna deal with the justice, if there's actually justice. There was actually no justice to be dealt with in Haridas Thakur's case and Ramananda Roy's case, but we could get ourselves in a lot of trouble when we see from one angle of vision. And last point, it's actually very dangerous when we investigate when we investigate the faults of others, actually. Just like, and it's actually from the Bhagavatam, there's actually a very nice verse and purport by Prabhupada where it says this, basically don't investigate the faults of others. So we could see, hypothetically speaking, like, let's say you want to investigate the faults of Haridas Thakur. Maya, the prostitute, they're always exposing their bodies to Haridas Thakur, right? So if you want to spy on them, then you might be entangled in the web of love. But Haridas Thakur, he's not, because he has Krishna Shakti, his mercy. Same with Ramananda Roy. If you want, just like a politician, what do politicians try to do? They spy on each other, right? They want to see if they're sleeping with prostitutes, right? So they'll install secret cameras in their room, in their house. Like, let's catch him, so he can be removed from power, right? So what happens? I'm glad you think this is funny. So what happens when they're watching a prostitute? Whether he's going, so they may even see that. Oh, they have their video, they have their secret camera, and then they see the prostitute. They was like, we found that he has this fault, right? He's sleeping with the prostitute. He's cheating on his wife, right? But what happens usually? They probably normally say, oh my God, my wife doesn't do half the things she do. I need me a prostitute. And then they become entangled in the same faults of their enemies, right? And so we see one politician removed from power, and same thing. It's like an assembly line. They're all boom, 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 remove. Why? So this is why we shouldn't investigate the faults, because we may become entangled in the same faults of our so-called enemies. Our enemies are, and so there's actually a verse that nice say this, so I'll end with this. It says in the 5th canto, chapter 19, verse 12, Narada Muni says, quote, I believe it's Narada Muni, quote, although Krishna is the witness who sees everything, his senses are unpolluted by the objects he sees, end quote. And so he's not polluted by a beautiful woman who tries to seduce he's free from I as well. He's free from being imprisoned by lust or free from I as well. So in Prabhupada's purport to this verse, I'll mention again, this is purport is from the 5th canto, chapter 19, verse 12. Srila Prabhupada says, quote, when we see someone beautiful, we are attracted. The sight of a beautiful woman immediately attracts a man, and the sight of a man naturally attracts a woman. Krishna, however, is transcendental to all these faults. Although he is the seer of everything, he is not afflicted with faulty vision. Therefore, although he is the witness and seer, he is aloof from all affection for the activities he sees. He is always unattached and separate. He is only a witness. And so this mentions, so exactly, end quote. So this says that Krishna can never be, he's the true witness, and whatever he witnesses, he can't be entangled in what he witnesses because he's free from I as well, because it comes from him. But when we want to witness stuff, when we want to investigate people's faults, then what happened? We become hypocrites. Really? You were criticizing for sleeping on a prostitute? What happened? Yeah, I had to get her. So there's this nice quote. It says, quote, a wise man sees as much as he ought, not as much as he can, end quote. So we'll end with that today. And so thank you. So the primary quality we're meant to cultivate is tolerance, titisha, or tador eva sahishnuna, tolerance like a tree. Thank you, everyone, for listening patiently. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Bunch of